Builder! Solo, a Star Wars story, flops. Disney decides to put a halt on all Star Wars anthology movies. Seriously, Disney? I mean, what'd you think was gonna happen? What can we learn from Solo in terms of our own writing for movies? You need to ask and answer small, medium, and big questions throughout your movie. Reveal them in a creative manner to create flow in your movie. Above all, make sure your movie stands alone with questions and answers, even if it fits in a series of movies. This generally causes viewer engagement, which will leave them wanting more. Done! Roll that intro! What's up, everybody? You're watching Too Long Didn't Read Filmmaker, where the answers comes first, the reasons come last, but we are constantly and always still learning. So this week we're going to tackle a very different type of video, and it kind of came about because I recently saw that Disney reported, because Solo was a flop, that they've decided to put a halt on the anthology series that happens between episodes 1 and 3 and the original trilogy episodes 4, 5, and 6. Now, they're not stopping the main series, but they're just putting a halt on the anthology. And I kind of just sat there going, Disney, what exactly did you think was going to happen? And what were you expecting through your algorithms that it was going to be a success? It didn't make sense to me, and upon thinking about it a little bit more, I think there's actually a lesson to be learned here. Now, I actually went and saw Solo in theaters, and I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. And upon thinking about this a little bit more, I asked myself, well, why didn't you love it? And I think I didn't love it because I didn't leave the theater in wonderment. Now, my idea of wonderment is a little bit interesting. My introduction to Star Wars was approximately about the age of 4 and 5, and English was not exactly the best language that I have. My English comprehension was terrible, but a friend still showed me a new hope. And watching it and just getting the visual, the visual aesthetics of it, I understood who the good guys were, I understood who the bad guys were, I understood each character's personalities, and I left my friend's house going, gosh, I wish X-Wings existed and lightsabers existed. Granted, this is a little bit different. I was a kid, but with these movies, I feel like, yes, the younger generation might be left in wonderment. However, you still need to make sure the older generation leaves with a certain feel of wonderment as well. So, that being said, we are going to tackle what we can learn from Solo in terms of story writing. Now, this is going to be a very general scratch of the surface, and I'm probably going to slowly release a series of videos of giving you guys just really basic ideas of what you can do to try to write an interesting story for your films. All right, so the first thing we need to understand is where Solo actually fits in this overall theme. So if you're not familiar with Star Wars at all, there was a trilogy here, there was a trilogy here. This was episodes 4, 5, and 6. This was episodes 1, 2, and 3. Solo sits right in the middle. It's meant to serve as a bridge to go into the original trilogy. Now, the problem with this format, when you're jumping back in time with movies, is that you probably already revealed a whole lot of answers in the movie before it. You just didn't go into it in detail of why the answers happened or how the answers happened. So when you're already battling that kind of a format, it gets a little bit interesting in terms of what you have to do in terms of your writing. So if you'll let me explain in video game terms for a real quick second. If you played games like Zelda, Metal Gear Solid, or just Metal Gear series, and Halo to a certain degree, you'll notice that the stories that happen within the video games, if you go by the release date, they're like, here's a story, and this was a prequel to that moment, and then this is the next one is a sequel to that, but a prequel to this, and then this one jumps all the way over here, and no one has any idea what that story meant, but then they slot in a prequel to that, which is technically a sequel to this. It gets really, really interesting, but here's the thing. Each game stood on its own. You didn't need to understand any of the storylines or, necessarily had to think as hard to enjoy the game. Now, the reason for this is obviously because the gameplay. The gameplay is user involvement in the story. So jumping back to Solo, That is the problem. They believe these movies are standalone because, yes, it's 2.5 hours long or what have you, and it is a movie. However, they forgot the important part of what makes a movie standalone: user engagement. Now, what is user engagement in terms of movies? Questions and answers. Okay, so when it comes to questions and answers, these questions and answers throughout your story for film is what kind of determines the pacing and the payoff and ultimately the ending of your film. So classic 3-act structure. Now, there are small questions like, what kind of pizza do you like? Do you like cheese or no topping? Okay. Then you have medium questions. Well, I'm actually allergic to certain dairy products. Okay, then I guess we might need to change this pizza order a little bit. That's a medium question. It's a little bit more specific, and it starts giving your character or the overall story a handicap, if you will, and it kind of puts a halt to the idea. Then you have like the big question. I can't eat pizza because my friend died from eating it. Okay, we should probably go get burgers then. All right, so then you have a big question. That was a big question, like, he died from eating pizza? How? And what happened? Like you're left with these type of bigger questions. Now, the answers, as you can tell, also become small, medium, and big. These answers, how you get to them is all depending on your creativity as a filmmaker. Now, what a lot of people I feel suffer from in terms of pacing is that they introduced a very small question that has maybe a small to medium answer, but they took 20 to 30 minutes to reveal it. And you're kind of like, that's it? And that's not what you want. You don't want your audience to feel this way. And this is why I feel Solo kind of fell flat in terms of people's expectations. It's not about anything that has to do with the storyline. It just had to do with the payoff to me. This movie tried to take like 2, 3, maybe four principal questions and answers from the original trilogy and said, we're gonna make each of those a 20, 25, maybe even a 30-minute segment of the entire movie. The problem is we already have all the answers. We knew exactly what Han Solo becomes. We know his certain achievements that were referenced in the film, so we already know he did it. In this movie, the question and answer is a small question and a small answer. It wasn't a big question with a big answer. So when you take a small question and take 30 minutes to get to the small answer, which we basically already knew, that doesn't become entertaining. And it comes at a very subconscious level. So assuming that you're probably in your 20s, 30s, and you meet somebody new or somebody introduces you to someone new, and they go, oh man, this guy's really funny. I saw him in stand-up and he killed it. He killed it, he killed it. Okay, we have expectation. This dude is funny. And the first thing out of their mouth is knock knock. We've all heard the start of that joke, or why did the chicken cross the road, or one guy walks into a bar. We've heard these phrases before. It's a short joke with a really short punchline, but can you imagine if you took 30 minutes to do a knock knock joke to get to your punchline? You would be pissed. You just sat there for 30 minutes to hear a knock knock joke develop to its final punchline. And that's what I feel Solo had done. So what's the bottom line here in terms of what can we learn from Solo on a story level to help us become better storytellers and ultimately make a film that's enjoyable and leaving people to want a little bit more? Basically, when it comes down to it, Solo was a movie filled with answers and no questions. The questions were already put upon us in terms of our wonderment from the original trilogy. So we already knew the answers from there, and we already formed those questions a long time ago, and Disney basically said, here, we're gonna spend about 20 to 30 minutes per answer. you can't really do that because we already knew the answer, which means the answer has no significance at all. And when you take 30 minutes to get to an answer that we already knew, that's not really entertaining. If it was a big question with a really huge answer, then yes, you need to take a little bit more time because there's probably a lot of things involved to get to that final answer. What would have been more interesting is if they answered all those questions in kind of like, I don't know, not the massive set piece of the movie, but they answer all those questions and they give us the spectacle we want, but they also asked us new questions that we didn't think Han Solo would have gone through before he eventually ended up in the original series. Had they done that, then I think the movie would have stood alone by itself while also serving the fans that already know the entire lore and also introducing new generation people who don't understand Star Wars at all, and for some odd reason Solo is the first movie that they ever watched in the series. If they were able to do a nice healthy mix of both, I think Solo wouldn't have flopped and people would have actually enjoyed it. Now, again, I didn't hate the movie, I just left it without wondering about anything. I mean, I had a couple questions, but they weren't pressing matters that I really needed to know in the next film or that it wasn't answered in the original trilogy. So that's what you need to do. In terms of your overall abilities of writing a story, you need to have small questions, big questions, and even bigger questions with small answers, medium answers to even larger answers, and you need to understand how to pace each question. Now, yes, some questions could be drawn out a little bit more, but if it's drawn out a little bit more, then you might need to think about, well, in between there, a bigger question got asked. And therefore you're driving the story all the way to its finale. So when you do this, start off asking yourself some questions about the characters you're doing or the world you're trying to build or the situation that's happening in the world with the characters. These are kind of things that you can start off with as an outline and ultimately craft your film. Now, if you've already finished a film and you got a great reception from it and you want to create a sequel, but you didn't really think about creating a sequel, so you didn't leave it open-ended, so to speak, then this is actually a really fun exercise for you because you can start taking everything you knew from the original world and you go, what kind of new questions can I pose? And would it serve the story to be entertaining? And also, would it make people want to watch the first movie? Or would they actually be extremely satisfied with just that film? Case in point for me was Terminator 2. I never saw Terminator 1, but I saw Terminator 2 and I loved it. And I didn't actually feel any need to go see Terminator 1 because Terminator 2 literally stood on its own. And hey, that's it for this week, everybody. If you have any questions or comments in terms of writing stories, definitely leave it down below. Again, I kind of want to start releasing a series of videos, but these videos are only scratching the surface in terms of storytelling. Because I feel like when you have these really broad building blocks that are like questions and answers and all the other ones that I want to tackle, when you start thinking about it at this level, you actually have a better chance at really exploring multiple paths to your story, for your characters, for your world, for just your whole series or your whole universe. And ultimately, I think you'll enjoy writing better instead of saying, oh, I need a formula. It needs to be a 3-act structure. It could be 4 acts, it could be 5 acts, or I need a character like this, I need a character like that. Not necessarily. Some characters can be double. So again, I want to start doing that. If that's something you really want to look at in terms of your filmmaking career, definitely like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.